Yeah, so hello everyone. I hope you all are doing good and are safe. My name is Priyanka and I am a UX researcher and I train at UX Experts. So I welcome you all to today's UX talk and I wish you all a very happy Independence Day. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, the brain lady, Dr. Suzanne Weinschenk. She is going to talk to us about the user psychology and user behavior. This is a subject in which we should all be deeply interested because we all know how important it is for all of us as UXers to understand the user psychology and their behavior. Susan has a PhD in psychology and is the chief behavioral scientist and CEO at the Team W, which is, I'm very proud to say, which is a female majority owned business. She is also an adjunct professor at the University of Wisconsin. Susan first used a computer in the mid 70s in her graduate school. She wrote and ran her first computer program, and the printer spit out a piece of paper that just said job aborted. Rather than being discouraged, she was fascinated. What would happen when normal people, not the computer scientists, interacted with these things called computers? She thus started her career in applying psychology to the design of the technology. She has been working in the field of design and user experience since 1985, which is more than 30 years now. She consults about 1,000 companies, startups, governments, and non-profits, and is author of several books, including 100 Things Every Designer Needs to Know About People, which I'm sure most of you all must have read. Suzanne is the co-host of the Human Tech podcast. She is a presenter, speaker, consultant, writes her own blog, and a column for Psychology Today online. I'm so glad and honored she is with us today and going to speak with us. We also have Guthrie Weinschenk with us, and he is the CEO of the Team W. Welcome, Guthrie. And before Susan speaks, I would like to introduce Mr. Tushar Deshmukh as well, who has created this amazing platform for us. So UX Experts is one of the top 10 user experience service providers companies in India. And Tushar is the founder and CEO of the User Expert. He is also the director of UXUITrainingLab, which provides professional training in human-computer interaction, usability, user psychology, user research, prototyping tools, and front-end development in various languages. And Tushar is working towards many more courses related to UX to be launched soon. Through this platform, he is not only training people but also provides jobs as well as entrepreneurship opportunities to his students. He is a visiting professor at Symbiosis Institute of Design and has given speeches at various other conferences. He has been working in the field for more than 18 years, and he has worked as developer, designer, researcher. I mean, almost every phase of the product development. He is a director at Amplify Reach and works as a UX consultant for various other companies. He is also a founder of Organize My Hotel. So now, before I hand it over to Tushar, I request you all to please keep your devices on mute and turn off your video. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka. Again, I welcome Suzanne Madam and Kansi for giving us this valuable time, and I wish everybody happy Independence Day. So I know everybody here is to listen, Madam, but I will just take few minutes. Basically I want to talk about what is UXTalk is all about. So basically, this is a platform I want to create, or which is created now. This is series of talks we are doing. When the lockdown was started all over this COVID situation, so we conducted say 5-6 webinars regarding different subjects, and I'm speaking with many people. So there is a lot of gap between UX, UIs. So there is a lot of misunderstanding in between this UX field. So this is the platform. So where invite the experts in the industry. So they will share their knowledge so that the UX awareness will come. So UXTalk is totally for actually knowledge plan in December, but we are doing a lot of activities through UXTalk later on. Postponing this thing. So in that probably next year we are planning this. Honored that Suzanne Madam has physically joined us. Personally, I followed her from my studies. I'm really happy to invite everybody. Basically, life science student, psychology is the subject where so soon speaking with personally with her, it was a pleasure experience, and I will not waste more time, and I will ask Madam to start today topic. So I will just set agenda. So after that we have a Q&A sections. So where you will ask questions regarding this subject, and Madam will answer those things. Okay. So I will just hand over. I will just request everybody again, just mute your microphone and just turn off video also. So people will see Susan Madam.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me on, and for those of you calling in from India, I'll say Happy Independence Day to you too. That was such a fun introduction of that you gave me with some of that history. I joke that since dates were given of when I ran my first program and so on, I like to joke that I was 5 years old in graduate school, so it's not as bad as it sounds, but actually that's not true. Yeah, the field of UX, it's got such an interesting history and has grown and matured so much, and I know that India in particular is a place where it's become extremely active. And I've obviously been in the field for a long time and have always thought this whole question of what is the experience like for the user and how can we improve that is critical. And then, you know, to me, because of my background in psychology, what comes into that is a wide range of things, but definitely psychology and behavioral science. And so I feel very lucky and blessed to have had a career in which you know, I get to take everything I know and am fascinated about human behavior and blend that with my fascination that I've had for many, many years of technology. And I've really enjoyed watching over the years this, you know, there's some things that stay the same, like there are some things about humans that are based on, you know, long evolutionary processes and the way we think and the way our eyes work and so on, and that kind of doesn't change, but then gets applied in interesting ways to all the technologies over time. And when you think about technology, you know, what is technology but just a tool that humans use to get something done or to have fun or to interact with others? And we've been using tools in this way for, you know, hundreds and thousands of years. It's just, you know, now we have more and more and more technology and digital tools. And whenever I've seen a new piece of technology come in, because in this span of my career, I've seen a lot of new technology come in, right? I mean, initially it was just graphical user interfaces, or even before, you know, character user interfaces, which we called CHUIs, before GUIs, and then on up into the whole internet and the web, and then through mobile devices, and then Internet of Things, and AI. I mean, all the different technologies that have been developed over time, and there are similar patterns we see, which is we first see a technology kind of start to break through the engineering and the science part of it, that, you know, the ability, you know, just use, you know, the ability to be able to do things on your smartphone, you know, which wasn't always around. Whenever a new technology comes out, it tends to come out with technology first, and user experience, attention to user experience comes a little bit later. We kind of see this cycle in and out. But these days, user experience is becoming so much more well known, so seen by many, not all yet, seen by many as a critical part of a product or service, expanding not just from products but into the user experience of service, into these blended you know, digital technologies plus service design. And so it's a wonderful time to be in this field. It's just exciting, and I believe the role of UX in products and services, which has been growing just exponentially, will continue to grow. Its importance will continue to be there. That our ability as UX people to have what's sometimes called, a seat at the table, meaning being able to really get up into the upper levels of an organization in terms of product management or customer service, will continue. And to me, that's very, very exciting. And it also means that we obviously need more people in the field. And it also means, interestingly, I think that the field is starting to get more specialized, because there's user experience and user interface design and usability. They all mean kind of slightly different things, and within each of them there are different roles. There are UX designers, but then there are UX strategists, and then there are UX researchers. And so I think that concentration in different areas is also kind of interesting from a career point of view. So I guess that's my little overview and background, and then I'd love to just get questions from you, Tushar, and I think you have some time allotted for people to ask questions as well. So I'll kind of let you take it back over where you would like the conversation to go.
Yeah, so user psychology is something we already expected in there is a lot of curiosity here in Indian professionals, because people are still struggling with the UX and UI. So I would like to, if you just give brief about what is the importance of this subject and why UX professional should learn about psychology and user psychology, obviously, and obviously then what is the behavioral science is why, because frankly speaking, whenever we, even not with the professionals, even with the customer, when we talk, we get this problem with the understanding about with their emotions and everything. So there is always a question that why we need to this. So please, just you can elaborate on these points so that
Sure.
Yeah, I will hand.
Sure. I mean, obviously a topic I talk about a lot. Sometimes just talking at conferences and so on, but also it's just a conversation we have when we're working with a client. So, we have clients that we do consulting with about their products and services. Some of them come to us because they know that we're involved in psychology and behavioral science. So then it's not like we really have to bring that up as an important topic at the beginning. But some of our clients come to us looking for what we tend to call more traditional UX work. So, they want us to review a product and make recommendations about whether it fits best practice for user experience design and so on. And they're maybe not explicitly thinking about the psychology and behavioral science part. So to me and to us at our company, it's so important because you're talking about improving the design of a product or service. If you're talking about UX work, you're talking about improving the design of a product or service to do one of two things, and hopefully both. One is to make it easier for the user to do whatever the task is that they want to do, whether that's buying something or signing up for a newsletter or looking for information at a medical website or whatever it is. They're trying to do that thing. Can we design it so it's easier for them to do, so they make less errors, so they perhaps enjoy the experience? And that's the usability and just the general user experience side of it. On the other hand, you also have the stakeholder or the business owner or whoever is doing this project, and if you ask them, someone on that part of the team may say something like, well, we want it to be easier for the people, right? They're going to use the same thing, but typically they have their own goals, right? Which usually work within the user goals, or often are the same as the user goals, but sometimes are not. You know, the goals of the organization or the stakeholder might be things like, well, we want them to buy more. We want them to spend more time at the site. We want them to do something, you know, the way we want them to do it. And so sometimes the goals of the organization are not in direct line necessarily with the goals of the human. And so either way, either if you're trying to make sure it's a good experience for the person, but you're also trying to meet the goals of the organization, that's where understanding user psychology and behavioral science comes in. Because first of all, just from the user side, our visual system works in a certain way. For instance, we know that peripheral vision, vision on the outskirts, not central vision, we now know is very important. It's where emotional images are processed faster. It decides at a fairly unconscious level whether I'm where I think I should be. The page, you know, when I get to a page, is this where I want to be? And the peripheral vision is deciding that. It's called getting the gist of the scene. So for instance, there are things about vision, peripheral vision versus central vision, or things about what gets people's attention immediately and unconsciously when they look at a screen. These are psychology, behavioral science facts about how our vision works. And then there are facts about how our brains work, how we think. There's fascinating information we now have as of the last 10 years about what's going on in the brain when we are making decisions. For instance, I'll just give you an example. We know that there are two types of decisions that people make. They are either making what's called a habit-based decision. You go into the store and you have a favorite type of cereal that you like to eat, and you're on your cell phone talking to a friend while you're shopping, and you're kind of not paying attention, and you just walk through the aisle and you grab the cereal you like that you always eat. It's always the cereal you buy. You buy the same one every time. It's a habit-based purchase. You pull it off the shelf, you put it in your cart. That's a habit-based purchase. But some of our decisions that we're making are not habit-based. They're what's called goal-directed or value-based. And that's when I'm thinking, you know, is this a good time for me to change jobs? Should I send out a resume? If I am going to switch jobs, what kind of job do I want to get, right? And it's a very, you know, rational, conscious, thought out type of decision. And we know that those two types of decisions, habit-based versus goal-directed, happen in two different parts of the brain. The habit-based decision happens in the basal ganglia, which is kind of deep in your brain. And the goal-directed decision about whether this is a good time to switch jobs is happening right here in your prefrontal cortex. And we also know some interesting things about this because they're happening in two different parts of the brain. The habit-based goal tends to happen unconsciously. The value-based, goal-based decision tends to happen consciously. We know that when one is active, when I'm making a habit-based decision, my prefrontal cortex goes quiet. When I'm making a goal-based decision, my habit part of my brain goes quiet. You literally can't make those two kinds of decisions at the same time. And one other thing that we know is that if you want people to make a habit-based decision, if you want them to just go ahead and buy that olive oil again because they always buy that olive oil, or you want them to go ahead and renew their subscription to a streaming service because they always renew it, it's always the same. Those are habit-based decisions. If you give them a lot of information, like if suddenly before they click to buy that olive oil again, you now give them this whole write-up on different types of olive oils, that as soon as they see that, they're going to switch from a habit-based decision and go back to a or start a goal-based decision, and now maybe they won't buy that olive oil. Maybe they won't buy it right away because now they're thinking about it. Maybe they'll say, well, maybe I should get a different kind. So if you want people to make a habit-based decision, you can't give them too much information. So that's an example. I know it was kind of a long one, but that's an example of things we know about human psychology, things we know about how the brain works. That if you don't know that, then you're going to do a design that may not get you the outcome you want because you thought it was a good idea to give them lots of information up front, but actually you just interrupted a habit-based purchase that they were ready to make. And that may not be a good thing for them, and it may not be a good thing for the business owner who owns that olive oil site. So there is vision and perception and hearing. There is how we think. There's behavioral economics, which is how we react to certain situations, which is what Guthrie specializes in. And to me, if you're going to design a product or service, you need to understand these psychological, behavioral science factors that are common to almost all humans everywhere. And then you also need to decide about cultural differences for the area you're designing for, because although most of what I deal with tends to be true across all humans, we also know that culture affects psychology and behavior, and so you have to understand that too. So to me, there's no way you can design anything without taking this into account. But I am biased, right? Because I have a PhD in psychology, so I'm a little biased.
Yeah, I think this is the correct answer. I think all participants which is following UX, because there is one more term in market, I will say, that is a CX, that is a customer empowerment or customer experience. And this is, I think, exactly what you just told. It is that thing was all about customer experience. Great. I have one more question. I just remember in your one of a book you write about basically we are not two things. I always remember that where you said basically all human beings are lazy. That was the first thing. And second thing, there is no such thing as a multitasking. But when we are in corporate, it is not about what we do as a designer, but as a professional designer, we always want to be as a multitasker. At least for bosses, we always say, okay, we have to fill a timesheet. So we are basically trying to pretend, I think, a multitasker. And what you are saying, I definitely agree on that. That basically all humans are lazy, basically, and the decision making. And just you can elaborate that point, and maybe that will give more insight about how our brain works and why you are saying that basically why we are lazy and how that impact in a decision making and UX in respective, and plus about the multitasking. So you can elaborate on this point. And
sure, yeah. So let's tackle the being lazy first. What I mean by that, I mean that, it's kind of a provocative way to talk about it in a way, but we have evolved over many, many years to be very efficient in how much in working, and by working I mean just either physically doing a task or mentally doing a task. Our brains are kind of small, and they use up an enormous amount of food, energy, glucose. You use up so much glucose, and this is why we have to eat. We have to keep feeding the brain. And so the brain has evolved over time to be very efficient. And so it only does what it needs to do. And let me give you an example. If I showed you a picture of a coin that's used for money in whatever country you lived in, and I said, don't look in your pocket, don't look in your purse, here's a coin, but I did 12 different iterations of the coin. Like I had the right one in there, like usually they have writing on it in a picture, but then I had a bunch of different versions that were not right, like that's not exactly the picture, or the picture of a person's head isn't facing that way, or the writing is on the left or is supposed to be on the right. And so these were 1 was the real coin and 11 were pretend coins. And I said to you, oh, which one is the correct coin, whatever the name of it is that is in your money. It's amazing how I do this a lot in my talks. I put up a US penny and then 1's real and then 11 pretend ones. And people don't know. I mean, I'll say, vote for it. What do you think? And people will be voting for all different ones. So, how could this be, right? How many times have you used a particular coin in your monetary use? Hundreds, thousands, and yet you can't identify what it is. Why? Because our brains know that there's only a few things, we call it salient cues. There's only a few things you need to know in order to use a coin. Usually you have to understand the size of it. If you have a couple coins in your pocket, the small one is this and the medium is that and the large one, usually size, maybe color. That's all you need. You never really look at it. You never really memorize what's on it. This is an example of our brains deciding over time what's important to get the job done and what's extraneous. And if it's extraneous, we do not pay attention to it at all. If you're walking down the street and you're going to get on a bus to go to work, there's all kinds of stuff going on around you. People and stores and places and cars and whatever. And most of it you won't remember and you won't pay any attention to because you don't have to, right? What's important is you are using your peripheral vision to get the gist of the scene and make sure there's not any danger around you. And then you're using your memory of how you get to the bus stop, and that's all you need to think about. So that's what I mean when I say we're lazy. We only pay attention to what we need to pay attention to. We will always try to do things in the most efficient way, physically or mentally. And that is 90% of the time advantageous and saves your brain glucose and frees up your brain to work on other things that are important. So it means that when we are designing something, we have to understand, let's say we're designing a website page somewhere. We have all the stuff on here that we think is interesting and important, and we've spent, hours designing this picture over here. And that may not be a salient cue. And people may never notice it. And that's okay. I mean, we have to just assume. So we have to really design so that people can quickly focus on what they need to focus on and do it. And if there is something else that we want them to focus on, we got to make that, really bring that, it's got to be colorful. It's got to have a picture of a person. It's got to be the right place on the screen, or else it will not get noticed. And so that's what I mean by being lazy. And in terms of multitasking, really in psychology we call it task switching. So technically, there's very few times when you actually can do two things at the same time. There are a few. You can kind of walk and talk at the same time, but even that, the research shows that you're really just switching back and forth. So between walking and talking. So if one of the tasks that you're trying to do is very practiced and rehearsed, like walking, and very automatic, then maybe you can multitask. But most of the time what we're doing is task switching back and forth. So I'm watching the TV, something on my big screen TV, but I'm also interacting, maybe it's American Idol or something, or The Voice or something, and I'm voting for my favorite performer while I'm watching on the big screen. When I'm doing that, I'm actually task switching. I'm watching on the big screen, then I'm looking at my phone, then I'm watching on the big screen, then I'm looking at my phone. We feel like we're doing it at the same moment, but we're not really. And the problem with that, it doesn't always have to be a problem. The problem with that is it uses up more brain power. And if you're at work and you're on a Zoom call and you're also checking your email, you're task switching. And it means that when you're doing one, you're not quite doing the other fully, and you'll miss what's going on the Zoom call. And so the estimate is that you lose 40% of efficiency by task switching during the day. And it can often leave you very tired, mentally fatigued by doing that. Now, the other thing to realize is that even though all of that is true, some people really like it. They like multitasking. They like task switching in certain circumstances. And that's usually because they're kind of bored with one task, and the Zoom call gets a little boring, and so they go check their email. How many of you just did that during this last spiel here? Or it's just more fun to be watching TV and texting with your friends about what you're watching. I mean, it's just fun. So sometimes people like it. Now, they mistake the liking of it by thinking they're very good at it. It's probably not true. They're still losing efficiency. They're still losing, productivity. But you enjoy it. There's nothing wrong with that. Just don't fool yourself into thinking it's necessarily a good thing. If you like it, realize that you will possibly get less things done, and you might be more tired at the end of the day.
There are a few questions, so I will just open up questions later on. So I have a couple of questions with me also.
Yeah.
So let's. So I just request everybody. I will definitely. You will ask directly question to Susan, madam. There is now. I have a last couple of questions here, because nowadays, again, I'm talking irrespective of how IT company works and how the professionally we do design and what we expect from as a UX designer. Basically, I don't like term or UX designer, because there is either UX or UI. You cannot be a both at a time, but still we have to do this. But nowadays people are talking about many times we copy the trend from lot of sites, and we take a sweet name for that. Okay, we are using the mental models. Okay, and so definitely the mental models are part of our behavioral, where we store everything and we have to use those things. So how that can be helpful in this thing. And there is always one dopamine hormone in like a choice. In make a choice, we say that there is dopamine hormone is responsible for many decision making. So how that will come to play in designing itself, and so that is my question. Okay, so you can answer on that part.
Okay, you want to start on which one?
First about mental models, and then about the hormonal changes, in particular how the decision making happens with dopamine or another hormones, and what is the designer should take from that.
Yeah, so in terms of micromoments, we tend sometimes when we're doing UX design, we will design what I call a high-level conceptual model. We'll make these bigger decisions about information architecture if it's a website, about objects and views if it's more of a task-oriented app, about color schemes, about general layouts. I mean, we like to get a high-level picture of how everything's going to fit together, so that when we're designing a particular form or page, we know what comes before that, what comes after that, and we have that big picture. And that's very important, and we need to do that. And that's what I call designing. I use the term conceptual model, high-level design, or sometimes I call it macro design. But there's also what's really important is micro-moment design. So that refers to, the person is on a particular page or screen, or it could be a voice interaction as well. And they're right there, and there's a particular thing either they want to do or you want them to do. Like you want them to push that button over there and sign up, or they want to find the particular product they're looking for, right? So that it's a small thing, one small step, that's the micro, in this one moment when they're on this pager screen or having this voice interaction. And, very tiny, that's all we want them to do. And what sometimes happens is sometimes we spend a lot of time on the macro design, the templates and the layouts and the information architecture and how we're going to use images and all of that. But we don't spend enough time on these tiny, tiny micro moments. And these micro moments are the make or break moments, right? I mean, you get to this point on this page, you got there through all the other pages and things you designed, but now the person is right there, and the wording of the button is not totally clear, or the button is too small, and they don't notice it easily, or they're confused about whether they're on the right page, right? These are micro moment failures. And we've got to pay as much attention, and maybe sometimes more attention, depending on what it is, to these micro moments than we do to the macro. We can't forget them. And sometimes we do, or sometimes the UX person does the high level design and then hands it over to some people who are doing, user interface, small micro designs. They might be good at doing that. Maybe they're not super experienced. Maybe they don't realize how important that one button is because they weren't in on all the strategy decisions. So to them it looks like a simple form with a button, no problem. They've designed a million of these. They'll go use the form that they use for something else over there. But they don't realize this is a really critical micro moment and it should be given more care. So we have to pay attention to the micro moments. We have to make sure that we know which are the critical micro moments, and we have to design for that. And then we need the high level UX person to review those critical micro moments. And then we need obviously to test that, right? If it's a critical micro moment, it's got to be tested with users. And I know that does not always happen because I run across bad micro moments all the time, just personally as a user. So I know that, and often I find those bad micro moments after a pretty well-designed macro design, but then I get that critical spot. It's not there. So I can tell when a micro moment has not been tested. It's like, okay, they obviously didn't test that. So we need to test with real users, and so that's why micro moments are so important. Now, the other question you asked, I think, was about
hormones.
Hormones and decisions?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we know that there are, again, back to the humans, it's interesting, we talk about psychology, and then we actually even have to cross over a little bit and talk about biology, because there are certain hormones that are released in the brain, and they have a variety of purposes. Some of them are particularly important to our decisions. So, for instance, dopamine is one of these. So dopamine is a chemical that does all kinds of things. It's very active in all. It has to do with your sleep and so on. But for our purposes here of what's important with dopamine is it used to be thought that dopamine was what's called the pleasure chemical, that when you ate some food you really liked, or drank had something to drink that was nice and sweet and cool, or you had sex, that all these pleasurable things, that's when dopamine would be released. But some interesting research, my favorite researcher on this is two of them. One is Kent Berridge and the other is Robert Sapolsky, are now showing that dopamine is not just released when you're having something pleasurable, or not just released when you get a reward, because that was another thing that we thought. But dopamine is actually released in anticipation of pleasure and reward. So we can tell by the studies now that when you receive that reward, or when you have that moment of pleasure, by that point, the dopamine level has already dropped off. So it's not being released and making you feel good as a result. What it's doing is it's anticipating feeling good and releasing then. And I think this is an interesting thing. It has implications. For instance, I don't know if you've noticed, but if you order something online from some retailers, not all of them, you get a series of messages from the time you order to past the time you get the product. You might get a message that says, thank you for ordering from us. Your product will be on its way shortly. And then a day or two later, you get a message that says your item has shipped and this will be the delivery. And then you have a couple, then your item has been delivered, right? I mean, you get these series of messages. And I think a lot of these companies think it's good customer service to give information, and it is, absolutely. But they may or may not realize that what it's doing is building anticipation. Every time you get one of those messages and it says your item is on the way, that's going to be a little bit of dopamine hit, and that'll make you feel good, and that'll make you feel good towards the company and about the product. It's building anticipation. And so I think there's things that we can do to build anticipation, to get those little dopamine hits, and it makes it more likely that when you get the product, as long as it doesn't totally disappoint you, it will increase your feelings of pleasure and happiness and trust with the product and with the company who sent you the product. And so that's an interesting positive effect. That's an example of dopamine. And there are other brain hormones. There's oxytocin, which, if stimulated, makes you feel close and connected to a group, and so on. So I think it's fascinating about some of these things that are going on in the brain and how that ties into the idea of user experience or customer experience.
I think that was great because as a designer, many times we ask to design something out of the box. Many times we get confused. What should attract the user? And many times, so this I think many people got answer about that. Now I'm just checking on chat. There are a couple of questions already participant has asked. So let's take a few questions from there. Let me just check. Okay, so someone has asked about, Priyanka, you can also help me out in this. Few questions you can read out.
Yeah. So Anand had asked how to decide whether a product should be targeted like to inculcate a habitual based buying, or it should be goal based buying.
Yeah, I think you need to, in order to make that decision, you'd probably need to do a little bit of research so that you understand which type of decision making are people tending to make when they purchase this. So, you could do a couple things. You could interview some people and just ask them, do you? I don't know that I'd say do you purchase this habit-based or goal-directed? They may not know what you mean, but you could certainly talk to them about, tell me about the last couple of times that you purchased this product. How long did it take you to decide to make the purchase? Is this something you just kind of do automatically, or do you think you have to really think through it? You could ask that. Another thing is you could see if you could observe the process that people are going through. So I think you're going to need to understand for your target audience, are they tending to do a habit-based or a goal-directed? Now, the other way you could approach it, by the way, is you could assume one and design for it, right? So you could assume it's habit-based and assume that you're not going to give a lot of information. You're just going to send them a quick notice and let them know that their plan is expiring, and here's the button to continue. And you could do that with, do an A/B test, do it that way. With another group of people, you randomly assign them to the goal-directed, in which you give them a lot of information first, and then just see which way do you get more purchases. So I think those are probably likely the two best ways to go about doing it.
So we have another related question from Aboli. She's asking how to avoid cognitive overload. So how many choices are too much?
Yeah, so we know, again, I'm going to say it depends on what you're purchasing. But in general, we know that if you give people 3 to 4 choices, that's about as much as they can handle. If you give them more than 4 at a time, they're really not paying attention to more than 3 or 4 anyway. So they're probably just looking at the 3 or 4 at the top. If you have a lot of options that you want them to consider, then you're going to need to do a hierarchy. So first give them 3 broad choices, and then when they choose one of that, then maybe there's some, 3 detailed choices within that category. So that would be the way to provide more choices. But really, if we know about choices, if you ask people how many choices would you like, they'll say, oh, show me everything. But then they get confused. We know that if there's a lot of choices, they may not make a choice at all. They may just say, okay, this is too complicated, I must not be ready. There's a part in the brain, it's very interesting, there's a part in the brain that keeps track of how long it is taking you to make a decision. This all happens unconsciously. And when you take too long to make a decision, the goal-directed part of your brain says, and you're not even goal-directed, a lot of this is unconscious, your brain is going to say, I'm not making this decision very quickly. That must mean I'm not confident about the decision. That must mean I'm not ready, and therefore I'm not going to make any decision at all right now. And most of that happening unconsciously. So that's the danger of giving too many decisions. We also know from the research that if you give people a lot of decisions, after they do decide, they are not as satisfied with the decision they made. If you give them less choices and then they choose, they're more satisfied with the decision. So it's really best to keep it as to a smaller number at a time as possible.
So we have another question from Stacy, and she is asking, do you have any thoughts on convincing executives of the value of UX research through the lens of psychology?
Yeah, this is always difficult. I mean, sometimes higher level people get it and they understand, and they might, a lot of times they're used to doing some form of research. Market research is very common, and a high level person probably thinks market research is a good idea. So I would, if you're having trouble, there's a couple things you can do. I would couch it in terms of, well, this is similar to some of the market research, but here's why it's a little different, and here's why we need to do this research rather than the usual market research. It's always good if you can give examples from other competitors in their space, that if you know that the competitors are doing UX research, you can say, well, let's say you work at a large bank, and you can say, well, here's some information that Citibank has done. They do user research, and so that way the higher level person will be like, whoa, wait a minute. If our competition is doing it, maybe we should be doing it too. And then there's always, doing just a tiny bit of it. It's not very expensive, and you get approval from someone to do it. And then, and maybe that high-level person was not in on that, and that's okay. But now that you've done a little bit of really interesting research, you can get that out there in an interesting way and get it to the attention of the higher-level people. So I think you're going to have to use one of those techniques if they don't seem open to spending time and money on
it. Let's take few questions and then.
Yeah, so on a similar note, Abhijit has asked, what are some of the important traits of being influential across the organization and working with different stakeholders through psychology, and how it can be improved?
Yeah. So we have, one thing I want to mention here about this question is we have at our training portal, which is courses.theteamw.com. We have a number of courses there, and some of them are free. And we have a free course. We have a bundle of courses that make up a UX strategy curriculum. And the first one of those is called Fundamentals of UX Strategy. And the Fundamentals course is a free course. And I highly recommend it if you're interested in this question of how can we work at a more strategic, in a more strategic way with UX in our organization, on our projects, and how do we get the word out to higher levels. So I do touch on that in that fundamentals course, and then we have a whole course, which is not free, but we have a whole course called Promoting UX in the Organization, and that's where we really get into this. So in order to be able to reach higher ups, you need to be promoting the work that you do constantly inside the organization. And you need to do that in a way where you, I mean, there's a lot of different people you want to hear about what you're doing. You know, it might be the programmers and developers. You want them to know what you're working on. It might be other UXers. It might be mid-level managers, and it might be upper level. And for each of those audiences, you need to be able to speak to the work that you're doing in a different way that really fits what interests them. Because, you know, let's say you did a little bit of user research and you have some insights. Well, how you're going to explain that to the developers and programmers, you know, what are they going to be interested in about that is different than what is a high-level C-level person going to be interested in. So it's not just enough to write up your results and put them out there. You're going to want to figure out how you can get in front of these people. And, you know, usually there's some kind of meeting, quarterly meeting that somebody's having where, you know, they're updating on what's going on in other departments. You know, work with your direct manager and say, you know, who could we talk to about maybe getting 10 minutes in the agenda of one of these meetings to just share what we've been working on. And then you want to put together a short presentation that is really for that audience, which means you need to understand what that, let's say you're trying to talk to the director of marketing or you know, some other, you know, customer experience officer. You need to learn how, and we talk about this in the course, how to rephrase what you're doing so that they can see the direct relationship between the work you've done and what their goals are. And another thing you can do is you can ask to interview these high-level people just to find out what they care about and what they think about. But also just by interviewing them, they'll start to see the connection of what you're doing to what they care about. So you might be able to forge some good relationships with them. So you've always got to be retranslating the work that you're doing into terms that are important to the person you're talking to.
Right.
Again, another question from him that he wants to know some examples of micro and macro moments.
Yeah, so I'll give you one example I like to use. I don't have the screens here to share off the cuff, but I'm an avid reader. I do a lot of reading, fiction, nonfiction, everything. And so I like to buy, you know, Kindle books, but I also like to borrow books from my library, and my library has Kindle versions usually that I can get. So I was doing this on my desktop, and then I got a notice that my local library had a new app, and I thought, oh great, that way I can just get it right on my phone. So I went to their site to use the app for the first time, and first thing I had to do was choose which is my local physical library, which is kind of weird because I'm getting this online. I don't even have to go to the physical library, so why do they need to know that? But they wanted to know that. So it's like, fine, and I know the name of my local library. I know it's called Marathon County Library Edgar Branch. I just happen to know that because I've been ordering things online. So I'm scrolling through the list of libraries to find Marathon County Edgar Branch. And the list is alphabetical, so I scroll down to the M's, but there's no Marathon County branch libraries. And then at the end of scrolling through the alphabet, it starts again with another A. It goes through another A to Z, and then at the end it went to another A to Z. So it wasn't really A to Z. So it's like, I can't, where is this? And then at that moment, and being who I am, I said, oh, this is a good micro moment example. And I started taking screen captures of my phone so I could use it in my workshops. Well, eventually, And then I counted how many libraries. I actually spent time. I'm so UX nerdy. This is what I do. I spent time counting how many things were in that scroll list in no particular order. 436 libraries in the state of Wisconsin, and I'm in a small state. So I had to scroll through 436. I finally found mine. But the other error they had made was they had a very small field, and it was on a phone. And so the Marathon County, there are 11 Marathon County libraries, and they all said Marathon County, Athens branch, Marathon County, Wausau branch. They had all the branches, but you couldn't see the branches, and you couldn't scroll over because there was just room for Marathon County, comma. So I couldn't use it. So then as I'm like, wow, this is just terrible, then a message pops up that says, oh, you've timed out. And if you have a question, call customer service, which they don't give the phone number for, and refer to this number. And then they had 26 characters of numbers and letters that I'm supposed to call in to a number they have not given me and recite the 26 letters and numbers. So you can guess that I didn't do that, and I never went back and used that app. So that is an example of a micro moment failure. I could not start the process of using that app all on one screen. Was not possible to do. So I really thank them for doing that, because it gives me a great example to use.
I think there are many people ask questions, so definitely we try to give them offline. But I have one just question regarding about the activities that the Team W basically does. So can you just, because I've seen many questions are related to the people are asking about courses and the books.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes,
So,
wonderful.
Yeah, so just you tell about that thing so people will come to know. And
yeah,
probably,
definitely.
Yeah.
So we spend about a third of our time doing consulting with clients that hire us to evaluate a product or service and tell them how to make improvements, or they may have a very specific question: how can we motivate this segment of our target audience to, do this particular task? So we do about a third of our time is consulting. About a third of our time is spent on our online video courses that I mentioned. And someone I saw posted in the Zoom chat the link for that. Thank you for doing that. And so we're always coming up with new courses. We have a bundle in UX design, which is a series of courses on UX design to get a certificate in UX design. We have another bundle for UX strategy. We have another bundle curriculum, and then you can get a certificate in that. We have another certificate curriculum for brain and behavioral science. And we have another certificate for brain and behavioral science for leaders, for managers. And we're about to release, almost done, so close, almost done, our newest bundle and certificate, which is on UX methods, which covers lean UX design thinking, user-centered design, agile UX, and our own behavioral design process. So, and then we have some individual courses as well. So definitely go there and check out, especially the free ones. So that's about a third of our time is working on that curriculum, keeping that updated. And then about the other third of our time is spent doing keynote talks and in-person workshops. Now, obviously, we're not doing in-person workshops right now, but we actually have a bunch of virtual workshops that we're doing. We're starting a series of 5 sessions through Smashing Magazine, starting that on Monday. So keynotes and workshops, and all of our work focuses somewhere on UX and somewhere on behavioral science, and it depends. Sometimes we're doing what I call just straight UX work, just evaluating a series of screens and seeing if it has best practice for forms and layout and design. I would say probably most of our work is this combination of UX and behavioral science, and then a small piece might just be the behavioral science consulting. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, sure. And definitely what we are actually talking with you and country all clear that probably in India, if you we can have some kind of a platform where we can introduce more of you.
Yes, I
And
would love to work with you on that. Very interested in getting more work and more connection going in India. I've visited India twice in my so far, and I've worked with many teams that are based in India. So always something that I enjoy.
so probably then we can have some Indian audience. We can probably have great access for, because I know I have personally referred your books and so much knowledgeable. And I also know you can talk as long as many hours you want on this subject, but we have a time restriction. So uh, so definitely today's talk, I think the intention is was uh, to give a just even if out of this participant, even if one person thinks that psychology and behavioral should be a steady part in the UX, so that will be great. And as you can visit the Team W website, and maybe in future we can do something together. And uh, so, any couple of questions, just last you want to conclude, madam, so that on behavioral and psychology, so that will be great. So, I will like to end up with the last comment from you, and we can close this session. And again, thanks everybody. So, Priyanka will then just continue on that.
Yeah, I want to thank you for having me. It's been great fun, great questions. I see in the chat people are asking to share the URL. So if I can just type that in right now, is that all right? Courses.theteamw.com is for the training portal. And then the best way to reach us is info@theteamw.com. And then there's also our website, which is theteamw.com. And you had mentioned at the top of the hour, Tushar, about our podcast, and that's called Human Tech. That's a free podcast. Guthrie's the official host, and then I'm the co-host. And we do a lot of interesting things there. We just interviewed two authors, Carl Fast and Stephen Anderson, on their new book called Figuring It Out, From Information to Understanding, which is a great book and has a lot of behavioral science and psychology. And then, of course, I'm going to recommend, some of my books. We just came out with a second edition of 100 Things Every Designer Needs to Know About People. That's the second edition. So if you haven't bought that first, definitely, if you're going to get the second edition. And then there's many other books that I've written, so you can check that out as well.
I will definitely share links with after this. Even we are recording this, so they can
Wonderful.
put all these links in our description, so that will be great. I think.
So thank you everyone for coming. It's been great fun, and Tushar, we're really looking forward to working some more with you and your organization moving forward.
Sure. So definitely I will bring something more, so that people in India also, and many people in subcontinent, they should learn about UX, and we can collaboratively, we can do many things.
Thank you, Suzanne. It was a really nice session, and I feel very proud that I got to talk to you. So, and also thank you everyone for attending this session. I would like to announce our next session. It is going to be on the 29th of August, and Darren Hood is going to be the speaker. Darren Hood is basically the mind behind a lot of Adobe products, which a lot of us use already. And he is going to be talking about the 4 pillars of the UX, which are usability and heuristics, information architecture, UX research, and interaction and interface design. So that session is also going to be very interesting. So I hope you all join us on the 29th. And all of you have a great day ahead.
Okay.
So whoever is in the US, or like if you are in India, then good night.